Americans for Fair Taxation presents the Weekly Chairman's Report, written by Steve Hayes, president of Americans for Fair Taxation, and recorded by Bob Paxton, a volunteer with the Florida FAIRtax Educational Association. And now, this week's Chairman's Report.
Hello, I'm Bob Paxton with the AFFT Chairman's Report for Friday, July 26, 2024. Donald Trump proposes eliminating the income tax and increasing tariffs to replace the revenue. In early June, former President Trump proposed to eliminate the income tax and replace the revenue with increased tariffs. Trump's proposal involves eliminating the federal income tax entirely, implementing high tariffs on imported goods to generate revenue, and further reducing the corporate income tax rate. The D.C. elites were horrified. They pointed out all the economic reasons why this wouldn't work, and here's some of those reasons. An average tariff rate of 85% would be required to replace that much lost revenue. This would increase prices to the American people by 85%. Other countries would retaliate by imposing tariffs on our exports. Such a move would cripple our exporting companies and cause great harm to the American economy. It would be extremely regressive because the main burden would fall on lower income people. The above criticisms are all valid. There are many legitimate reasons to oppose imposing tariffs of that magnitude. Unfortunately, Mr. Trump missed the simplest and best way to replace the income tax, the fair tax. Now, why the fair tax is preferable to raising tariffs was extensively covered in the January 19, 2024 Chairman's Report entitled President Trump, You Don't Need Tariffs, You Need the Fair Tax. The following is excerpted from that article. Almost everyone agrees that if a U.S. tariff is applied to imports, our trading partners will reciprocate with a 10% tariff on U.S. products imported into their countries. This 10% tariff will be added to the selling price of the product and paid by American consumers when they purchase the product or a product containing a tariffed product. The U.S. exporter is already exporting goods whose prices are inflated by 15 to 25% because of the cost of the income payroll tax system. Now, the price of his product would be increased by both the VAT and an additional 10% tariff tacked on in the receiving country. Now, true, a country exporting to the United States will see the price of their product increased by 10%. However, this will simply make the product more expensive, and the cost of the tariff, like any other tax, will be passed on to the consumer who will pay it in the price of the item. Now, contrast this dismal situation with life under the fair tax. The fair tax is clearly a border-adjustable tax under World Trade Organization rules. Products will be between 15 and 25% cheaper because the cost of the income payroll tax system is no longer included in their prices. Products will be 15 to 25% less expensive in the U.S. and 12 to 25% less expensive when exported because the fair tax only applies to the retail purchase of new goods and services in the United States. Imports will be subject to the same 23% fair tax as domestic products. This will eliminate a huge advantage that foreign producers currently have over U.S. producers selling their products in the U.S. And this will lead to more production and more jobs in the United States. There's no need for tariffs, no need for a trade war paid for by the U.S. consumer. The choice is easy. Do we want a system for funding the government that is so simple that everyone can understand it? That shows the cost of the federal government on every retail receipt so all of us understand what we're paying, that helps U.S. companies compete with foreign competitors, that keeps jobs in the United States rather than exporting them to other countries, that permanently establishes the solvency of Social Security and Medicare, that eliminates special treatment for any group of taxpayers, and is the largest transfer of power from D.C. to the people since the Constitution was adopted. Now, D.C. is ignoring the one real solution that allows us to remain citizens and not subjects, the fair tax. The fair tax is simple, non-invasive, but most of all, it works. In conclusion, it's interesting to note that all the people attacking the proposal to replace the income tax revenue with tariffs don't try to defend the income tax. Now, this is an election year, and even though Biden and his mental lapses have dominated the news cycle, why didn't Biden attack Trump's proposal at the debate or at any number of other campaign appearances? Well, the reason for that is clear. Both Republican and Democratic polling data shows that the income tax is very unpopular with voters of all political leanings. The Democrats don't want to attack Trump's plan because doing so would put them in the unenviable position of having to defend the income tax. President Trump, everyone, well, at least that's everyone except those in the D.C. bubble, love the idea of eliminating the income tax. But imposing exorbitant tariffs is not the right way to replace the revenue. The right way is to pass the FAIRtax. High tariffs would cause a great deal of economic harm. The FAIRtax would bring about unprecedented economic growth. The American people will overwhelmingly support the FAIRtax if they're given the chance, and all of us will benefit if it's enacted. President Trump, you want to eliminate the deep state. And one of the pillars supporting the deep state is the federal income tax. Eliminating it will be the largest transfer of power from D.C. to the people since the Constitution was adopted. The solution? Pass the FAIRtax. Now, why would D.C. pass the FAIRtax and give up an almost unlimited source of donations? Well, they won't, at least not voluntarily. The only way they will is if the rest of us demand it. Isn't it time to end this ludicrous tax collection system in the IRS along with it? Now, there's going to be a vote on the FAIRtax in the House of Representatives. We now have the opportunity to force all members of the House to show where they stand. They can vote for the President Income Payroll Tax System, or they can vote for the FAIRtax. They can support the corrupt income tax in the IRS, or they can vote to eliminate it. It can't be any simpler than that. They can hide the true cost of their government, or they can pass the FAIRtax and show everyone the true cost of government on every retail receipt. And finally, they can support the largest transfer of power from government to the people, the FAIRtax, or they can vote against it. Now, if members think the FAIRtax needs to be amended to address a problem, they can propose that change. Don't let them get away with rejecting the entire bill because it has a perceived flaw that can be easily addressed, and if it's a real flaw, correct it in the final bill. And don't think for an instant that there aren't any flaws in the income tax. Help us bring about real tax reform and stop future IRS abuses. By contributing or investing $10.40 a month, you help provide a financial base to Americans for fair taxation. If you can make larger contributions/investments, these will be used not for salaries, as we're all volunteers, but for the needed updates to our economic studies, which will be vital for all future years. Please go to FAIRtax.org to invest in AFFT and help us pass the FAIRtax. It's an investment in your and your family's future.
This has been the Weekly Chairman's Report, written by Steve Hayes, President of Americans for Fair Taxation. Check back every week for news and information about the fair tax, and learn why the fair tax should replace our antiquated federal income tax system. If you'd like to receive a copy of the Chairman's Report in your inbox every week, sign up at FAIRtax.org.